Welcome to the Inner Sanctum podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Julian Gill, and I'm back with Andrew. Andrew, what show we talk about this week?
Hey, today on the Inner Sanctum, we're going to talk about Sydney, Australia, November 22nd, 1980. This is one of my favorite shows, and this was very, very cool to go back and watch it. And I think that's the purpose of this podcast. We're not trying to uncover new things or talk about new shows or anything like that. It's about pulling out the VHS tapes, the DVDs, the video files, or whatever, these old shows, and enjoying them again. There was a real time of innocence when a lot of this stuff came out, and being able to watch it when it was happening or when it was being released was something very, very cool. And hopefully this show brings you back to that.
All right, Sydney! You wanted the best, and you got the best! The hardest band in the world! Cheers!
I think people have to remember that when we say we're digging into the KISS unofficial archives, a lot of this stuff started out as unofficial and has been legitimized over the years, either being released in various formats, notably on the Kissology DVD sets or elsewhere. But to us, in our collector minds, they have never really become legitimized. We just think of them as the bootlegs that we enjoyed when we were, first starting out on our
When
on
you
our
guys were
journey.
my age. When you guys were my age.
When we were a lot younger than you as well. I mean, this takes me back to my teen years, early 20s in Canterbury, going down to the markets and picking up bootlegs and, not being able to do video because of the PAL NTSC stuff. It goes back in time. A lot of these audios, though, were the stuff of legend to me, the sneak attacks, the fried alives, all of that stuff, including the Inner Sanctum and, Sydney 1980, and of course London 1980 being another one of the big ones.
Yeah,
Obviously to a
yeah.
Brit.
Yeah. I mean, something like this. Seeing this show was, you put it great. It's the stuff of legend. You heard about this show. This very, very similarly to the Japanese show from 1977. This was officially released in that time period. Yes, the Inner Sanctum wasn't aired in Australia until 1981. But at the time, back then, information moved so much more slow. So for a concert to happen in 1980 and then for a portion of it to be aired in 1981, it's still pretty current as far as that goes. There wasn't any YouTube back then. You were going to film a concert and be up on YouTube the next day. This was still current. And the unfortunate part about this is by the time that the Inner Sanctum actually aired on Australian television in early 1980, it was February 1980. Kiss
81.
Stereo, yeah, if I were 1981, Kiss Stereo was all but done, and it was one of those things where it was really hot, and then by the time this aired, it was on to the next thing. So it was such a time capsule thing. So, but like we did on the other shows, talk to me and tell me, what do you remember about seeing this show, whether it be the full show, which we'll talk about, and the Inner Sanctum that we'll talk about. When do you remember seeing those first?
First clips for me that I ever saw of this would have been with Kiss Exposed. I didn't have videos. I was strictly the audio guy, as I'm well known. And I've
Still the audio guy.
also I still am. I listen with these things on, whether I'm on my walks or sitting in front of my computer writing or working. I'm listening to music. I can't separate myself from that work long enough to sit and focus on a video for a long period of time and really get into it. I never could. That's why the shows that I went to had such an overreaching value to me. So I was audio. I had this show audio version, probably a rip or it may have even been an audience recording from the show. I don't remember, going way back.
I had, well, because again, in the 90s, you couldn't download video from the internet really, but there was this website called kissvault.com, and I hope some of the listeners remember this website because I loved this website. And I downloaded a real player audio version of this show. And then what I did, because I thought I was a genius, because I was like, how I couldn't burn CDs at the time, and if you could burn CDs, I don't think you could burn real audio. I don't think the program supported that yet. But I thought I was a genius, so what I did is I took my 2 little computer speakers, I put them up against my boombox, and then I recorded on cassette my boombox picking up the Kiss show. So I had it on cassette, and I listened to that thing. I can't tell you how many times. I had that one, and then I had San Francisco in 1977. But
I'm looking at my desk drawer right here because when Kai retired Kiss Vault
Mhm,
and 495 and Kiss Confidential, which
mhm,
were all basically the same thing, I
mhm.
still have a CD that he sent me of the websites
That's
and
so cool.
all that real audio. I still keep a old box around so that I can, transfer that stuff when I get the urge. I mean, obviously a lot of it's been superseded, but that site was the place to go to
That
listen
was.
to a whole, but it wasn't just that show, just the breadth of what was available on that, just organized by a single Kiss fan in essence to share with the Kiss community. It was
Mhm.
a it was a happier time in the old
You
days.
you predated boneheads like us, but I mean, I just remember spending so much time on that website, and I think the 1980 show was the one I played the most. But like you, I remember seeing this on Kiss Exposed, many, many, many years later. I think by the time I got Kiss Exposed, or by the time I first saw Kiss Exposed, a lot of the stuff was already out there. But I was naive to it. I didn't get that yet. But what was cool about this show is, um, we did get our first official live recording of the show released with the "You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best" Japanese import CD, and then the American vinyl. New York Groove is from this very show. So Kiss must have a superb audio recording, because of the AB New York Groove 1980 to the video. Yeah, it's the same performance, but clearly there's much more juice and power behind the version on "You Wanted the Best." And I'm just not talking about extra audience screams. You can clearly tell that there is some superb audio version out there. Maybe they have the multi tracks. Who knows? Who knows? But I tell you, listening to that version of that song on the "You Wanted the Best" import was so very, very cool. We talked about in the last couple of shows about how this is one of 2 tracks that have Eric Carr on it that's been officially released. There was a "Heaven's on Fire" single released, from the Animalized Live and Uncensored video. But um, listening to this show, this version, or whatever version you want, it's so clear that the band was refreshed and had so much power. This not only is the first show that we're talking about that doesn't have the original lineup on it, but this is also the first non-original lineup tour in the band's history. So, being able to look being able to have an official document of that very first time another member stepped in is something that I don't think we realized the importance of it at the time, and maybe we still don't even realize the importance of it.
Yeah, so I'm just fact checking as we go because you've forgotten one song, one live track that includes Eric Carr that was released, and that is, of course, "Talk to Me."
That's on the box set, though.
That's on the box set, so that's
Yeah, but
three
that was
official.
later. That was later. So,
Oh, no, oh, splitting hairs.
well, because see, that's the thing. Because yeah, "Talk to Me" is on there, and "Talk to Me" is from Auckland,
You know
1982.
someone's going to say it. You know someone's
Probably
going to put in the comments. No
you're
matter how you
probably
set it up,
you're
you're going to be someone's going to point it out. So let's just say it.
okay. So there were but here's the thing. I mean, I consider the box set an official album, and I know we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but I consider the box set a collection, and then I consider albums, because there's stuff on the box set that we never got anyplace else either. But anyway, regardless, um, Sydney, Australia, 1980. Um, is the Inner Sanctum, which aired in Australia in 1981. Now, were you aware that the it was simulcast on FM, or was it FM? Might have still been AM, but it was simulcast on stereo radio stations. So, like, you turned on your TV, turned the volume down on your TV, then you went to the radio and turned the volume up on the radio, and you heard it in stereo. Apparently, that was a big deal back then. Not a big deal now, but it was a big deal back then. I know it was a big deal because in bootleg circles, TV ads circulated about that being like the hype point of it. It's like, hey, you're seeing Kiss, but you're hearing them in your stereo too. Like, that was a big deal back then. Not so much
Yeah, but
now.
you have to remember that back then playing Pong on your TV was a big deal as well. So
Yeah, yeah, but so, and I've listened to the FM recording of this, and perhaps it didn't really hold any anything special for me because probably the video that I saw at the time already had that synced, and I didn't understand what the big deal was at the time. But apparently in 1981, that was a big deal. You were going to watch it on your TV, and then you were going to hear it on the radio. They loved it.
Yeah,
It sounded.
and in trader circles, you'd often get that, as Sydney 1980.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
was what would show up on the cassette,
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes. But I want to say straight up, I have an issue with 1980 bootlegs and the
Okay.
tinny, horrendously thin sound. I always found it very unpleasant until recent years. Some of the stuff coming out now of the Sydney performance has a much more pleasing and warmer audio to it,
Mhm.
that makes the listening experience a lot different. So I was always biased against it. In my early bootleg career of listening to these things, it was always like 1980. I don't care about, which
That's
is
so
weird.
weird. That's weird because I had the opposite. I was so interested in hearing what the band sounded like and this moment in time. I was completely obsessed with this tour. I couldn't get enough from this tour. And the unfortunate part about it is there really aren't a lot of good documents about this tour. Much later we got Auckland 1980, which is a soundboard, came from Eric Carr. But aside from Auckland and Sydney, there's no other soundboard recordings from this tour. Can you believe that they played the Palladium and we still don't have an official documentation from that show?
No, and that bums me out because there are memos that they were clearly trying, or Chom in Canada was
Mhm,
trying to do a broadcast of that
mhm.
show. Just imagine how crazy that would have been. There are also talks about possibly doing King Biscuit. But the
That would
problem
be
with Kiss in 1980 is that Kiss was
nobody
dead as a
cared.
doornail.
Yeah, nobody
No
cared.
one cared. So none of those things happened, all those great ideas. So there were plans. And I would hazard a guess that they definitely recorded Palladium, and certainly rehearsals that are probably sitting in the vaults, just because it wouldn't make sense for them not to have. And maybe that's me going a little bit SpongeBob. I am wearing a yellow T-shirt, in hopes and optimism, um, imagination, the
That
rainbow.
would be cool. That would be cool. Okay, so part two of my question, and I'll answer this one too. Did you see the Inner Sanctum first, or did you see the full concert first? If you
I saw
remember,
the Inner Sanctum. Inner
did you really?
Sanctum.
Hmm,
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah,
hmm.
without a doubt. And
I
again,
saw
I
it.
saw it after I came to America.
Mhm.
So again, I'm a little stunted videoly, or in terms of videos, because I heard it audio wise, but I only saw it.
Mhm. So I saw Exposed, which is interesting about Exposed. They used the Inner Sanctum edit of Detroit Rock City in Exposed, which I thought was odd. I don't know why they did that because it's shortened down. But I saw the full show before I saw the Inner Sanctum because I just thought the Inner Sanctum was the show. I didn't know that there were additional clips on it. So I got it after my days of going to the Rainbow Rockatorium, so I didn't get this from Gary Danko. But I got it, I think, from one of those Kiss websites like FridayLive.com or something, maybe even from the guy in Michigan. Um, I got it from one of those websites, and I got the full version of the show, which has a time code attached to it. So this, who knows where this actually came from or why it had a time code. I know there were other versions that um, crop the time code out, and if you watch this is so silly. If you watch the version on Exposed, and even if you look at, I think there's a clip of this on Extreme Close Up. Well, hold on, I'll just Extreme Close Up. Um, No, there isn't there isn't. So it must be well on Kiss Exposed. If you're watching the part where they do Ace's solo, they cropped the time code out too. They did a false widescreen on there. So I was always confused as to what the band had or what was actually out there. Because not only did I get the version of the full show with the time code on it, but a couple years later, and I still have this on DVD, came from VHS, of a version of the full show without the time code, but it almost looks like it was a film transfer versus just a regular video transfer. The frame rate is a little off, and that may just be a PAL to NTSC transfer. Um, but if you put them side by side, the version with the time code plays smoother than the version without the time code. And I've noticed that as the years gone on, that version without the time code, not a lot of people talk about it. It's the full show too. Unfortunately, this was officially released on Kissology Volume 2, no time code. And yeah, the colors look great, it sounds great, it's cool, but it's missing the bass solo and the first and second verse of God of Thunder right before the drum solo. Why?
Well, it's also a matter of why with Exposed and Extreme and any of the things, the product that they did. What sources were they using to construct those? Was it just grab a tape that says Australia 1980 and go with it?
Mhm.
There doesn't seem to have been a lot of quality control
Mm-mm.
in terms of doing what we kind of do, I guess, as geeks, searching for the very best and going all Nigel from Spinal Tap with the video of marginal increases in quality. In terms of putting a product together, the bottom line is what's going to count. They're
Mm.
not going to spend or have someone, upcharging them hour after hour for video research when they can just grab a tape, put it together. And to be perfectly honest, it does kind of match the quality of the rest of the crap on the product. So good enough.
That's
Kiss
sad that
fans will
it's
buy
just good
anything.
enough. Yeah. I remember when I first heard the rumors about it coming out on Kissology Volume 2, and they says, "Oh yeah, it's coming out, but it's missing the bass solo and it's missing the first part of God of Thunder." I go, "There's no way." I go, I have that." And then of course, then I get it, and I was like, "Well, it is missing that." It was cool to finally see it without a time code on there, but again, there's got to be other versions of that out there. So, but you're right. They just kind of it was the whole thing behind the Kissology series was that good enough. They should have hired goons like us, and we would have done all the legwork for them, probably for nothing, and found the best versions of these shows. Um, but anyway, so in addition to uh, being in unofficial circles, you had the full show with the time code, the full show without the time code. Several different edits of the Inner Sanctum were basically in unofficial trading circles. You had the version that actually aired in Australia, but also throughout the years, different edits of the Inner Sanctum have been in the trading circle. And what I mean by that is like you could tell these were legitimate work in progress edits. No time codes on them, which I thought was odd. Because typically, if you're working on something and you're giving a copy to somebody to review, you put a time code on it or there is some type of watermark on it. But all these different, there's about, I think, the last I counted, there were 3 different versions of the Inner Sanctum out there. You had your official one, then 2 other ones that are work in progress edits. Some of them appeared on the Kiss Vision media collections, and then others were just there by themselves. But we are very fortunate to have a really, really good copy of the Inner Sanctum that is available in fan circles. It looks just as good as anything else, probably better than anything on Kissology. Um, but the last thing I want to mention about that is in 2003, the concert was supposed to be released on DVD unofficially, similar to what happened with the Lost concert in 2005 or 2006, whenever that came out, the Roosevelt Stadium show. But it never came out. Live at Sydney Showground never came out.
Yeah, that got pulled. I was going back and trying to find a large picture of the cover because it was live from the Sydney Showground, I think it was called, and it
That's correct.
also committed the cardinal sin of using the Kiss logo on the packaging as well. So they were a dead man walking from the moment they
Yep.
advertise that,
Yep.
let alone trying to release a full concert video or full. I don't remember if it was the Inner Sanctum or whether it was the actual full show that they were
I don't
trying to
know if we
release
ever
because
because it got pulled so soon. I don't know if it ever was known what it was. I know it never came out. I know we were waiting for it to come out, but I know it never came out, and I don't think it ever made it far enough to determine what it actually was, whether it was the full show or Inner Sanctum. I'm
those
assuming
are
it was
the good
probably
old days.
the show.
Those are the good old days in the early 2000s. All these Kiss videos that would get announced and never came out live at the Sydney Showgrounds. There was also the Universal one that
Music
compiled all
videos.
the concept videos
Yep.
using an outtake from the unmasked Creatures of the Night shot. I mean, what a great time it could have been. Here we are jonesing for new product in 2024, going, what? There's nothing on the release schedule coming. There's no boxes, no this. And back then it was like, oh, here comes the showground, here comes the videos. And
Mhm.
then it would take until 2006, 7 to get Kissologies.
I mean, you had to assume that even in 2003, the band knew what they were going to do with these shows as far as Kissology goes. And that's probably going into why they started paying attention to the unofficial Kiss convention and started really paying attention to the bootleg circuits because they wanted to release these shows. They didn't want anybody else to release them. And it was also my understanding, and this could just be a rumor or this could just be something I heard, but it was my understanding that the whatever shows were on Kissology ended up on Kissology, not because it was all the band had, but the band wanted to release the stuff that was already out there in order to now they have the copyright on said show. Whether that's true or not, we'll never know. But I can tell you this, we're almost 20 years on since the first Kissology came out, and nobody has anything really good to say about those things. I think they were cool a little bit at the time, but for the diehards like us, it was always something was missing, and that goes back to the show that we're talking about today, Sydney, Australia, 1980, was the best version we've ever seen of that show, but still, it was soured because it was missing, the blood solo, and it was missing the first part of God of Thunder.
Yeah, and we know that there are videotapes from those shows. If you think about recent years, some
Mhm.
of the stuff that's been popping up on Twitter from Sydney.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's actually another video editor from Australia who I've talked to quite a bit. Kiss Remasters Films. He's on Twitter and he's on YouTube. Some of the stuff he does is just out of this world, just awesome stuff. And he's shared clips of certain things with us. So, but I think he's a professional TV guy. He has access to stuff that maybe we do or do not have access to. I'm not really certain of that, but he has shared quite a bit on his YouTube page. So, of course, after you're done watching this, go check out his YouTube page and give him a like and a follow. But finish watching
Yeah,
this
because
first.
you'll be like Andrew and I were going into the Kiss Vault and watching all that real audio and real video back in the day. And
Mhm.
it's still great to get a peek at this stuff. I mean, I know people always like, well, I want to see more. I want to see the whole thing. You know what? Begging for an eyeful, but you only get a peek. Enjoy the peek.
Be thankful for what you had. I remember growing up in the late '90s and just it would take almost 2 weeks. Do you pay for a videotape? And you can't even pay on the internet yet. You had to like send a money order or send a check, wait for that to clear. Then they're going to send you the tape. It wasn't instant gratification. It really wasn't. And I think I actually purchased Roosevelt Stadium and Sydney 1980 at the same time, and I got two tapes, and I was like, "Oh my god, two different tapes at the same time! Oh my god, I couldn't believe it!" And of course, it was like probably the worst version of Roosevelt Stadium 1976 when I got it on VHS, but it was still two tapes of Kiss stuff that I hadn't really seen at that time. I'd only seen
What
the
were you paying for tapes back then?
$15.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. $15 versus what you do now, which is basically watch it on YouTube for free and download it,
Mhm.
or you go to some of the trading sites and download it. I mean, back then people were paying. I was paying, I think, £15 for bootleg CDs in Canterbury, um, and now there's none of that. Yeah, you can still buy silvers and printed up DVDs and all that stuff, and now they are really expensive too, 50, $60 in some cases, but for those people who are only interested in just enjoying and consuming these things, you don't need it.
I I don't get the whole upcharging of bootlegs or any of that stuff. I'll never purchase a bootleg show. I just won't. It doesn't matter to me if it's on a silver CD or whatever. I just want the content. I don't care about the pretty pictures on a bootleg. I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't bought a bootleg in years. The last one I bought, I only bought because someone sent me an email saying, "Hey, did you know you wrote the liner notes to the this bootleg ad?" I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, it's even got your name and they've cut and pasted all your stuff." I'm like, "I got to get me one of those," and then I got rid of it. Once I'd
Um,
seen it, but
unless it's something that we've never seen, or unless it's something like with a significant upgrade, like we had talked about previously about that Japanese website that was selling those DVDs. I mean, a lot of those shows we hadn't seen at the time or hadn't seen in that quality. That's different. But I'm not going to purchase, you know, Atlanta '79 audience recording on colored vinyl. I'm just not going to do that. there's no purpose. So just like I'm not going to purchase Sydney, Australia 1980 because it's on Kissology Volume 2. And yes, it is the best quality that we've seen of this show. But it's just a shame that it's plagued with issues. So let's talk about the meat and potatoes of this show, because I'll pose another question to you and I'll pose another question to everybody watching. There were 2 shows played in Sydney, November 21st and November 22nd, 1980. How much of November 22nd is this show? It's clear that this show is a hodgepodge of both. 100%. It's
Yep.
super clear that it is on the Inner Sanctum, but even when you're watching just the full show here, it's super clear that this is an amalgamation of 2 shows. Very, very clear. And clear
Yeah,
there's
without a doubt.
overdubs.
Yeah, which they did immediately after. They had a gap. It's in Mask Hysteria. Again, I write this stuff down because I can't remember it off the top of my head anymore.
Wait,
But they
hold
had
on.
a gap in between.
Hold on. What's Mask Hysteria?
Mask Hysteria, the book covering 1980.
Can we still get
Available
it?
on Amazon. I try not to pimp myself. I just can't stand doing that. But
Sometimes you got to.
well, sometimes you have to, because again, I create these things so that I have reference guides for my own use and edification. So,
Listen,
they
we gotta
clearly
keep
went
the
into the
lights on.
studio.
We got to keep the lights on in the studio, so head over to Amazon.com and purchase Mask Hysteria, written by Julian Gill. It goes over the whole 1980 tour, not just the Australian portion of the tour, but it goes over the whole 1980 tour. It's fantastic. I was able to see an early copy of it. I read through it and I gave some of my notes. It's absolutely fantastic. And the cover artwork was done by another friend of the show, Claudio Bergman, who is a fantastic artist, and he has another great YouTube page where he was interviewing Dennis Wallach, the original designer for Casablanca Records and Rocksteady Productions. So go check him out too. After you're done watching this, though, don't stop and then go. Just after you're done watching this, go check out his stuff. It's very cool.
Yeah, one of the most original and entertaining podcast series in recent memories, what Claudio has done with Dennis. Just from a design perspective, you will learn something new or hear the truth about something that maybe you didn't know. Absolutely amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great stuff. So, so back to Sydney, Australia, 1980. It's clear that it's 2 shows. Maybe it's more, because I also heard rumors that Perth was also filmed.
There were some cut edits, or particularly there was weather conditions in Sydney over the 2 nights that they were filming. And my understanding, anyway, and again, I did put it in the book as such, was that they used some of the Gene flying, footage from other shows in order to present it properly, because I think there are a couple of occasions where his cape would be billowing around him in the wind and not working out artistically, so they had a better shot. Again, it's all down to the artistic decision of what they do have, because they didn't just go into Sydney and film, because they had dozens of cameras, all sorts of different cameras. They had to test out some of the equipment prior. So there is a bit of footage from other shows during the tour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There were initial rumors that when Kissology Volume 2 was being prepared, that Perth may have been on Kissology Volume 2. It didn't end up that way, but it's interesting to know, like, what is actually what we consider November 22nd, 1980. It's again, it's super clear. There are definite parts in the show where you can see there are overdubs, especially during the vocals during "I Was Made for Loving You." There's definite overdubs on that too. But you could also see, eagle eyes watching. Sometimes Paul's choker's on, sometimes it's off, and you just wonder, maybe this is just a first night versus second night thing. But it's interesting what actually is out there, or is anything out there, or is the only thing that survived was the actual final edit of this show, or all the other things just fodder at this point. So who knows? Who knows? But it's super clear that this is not just one show.
Yeah, I don't think it's fodder at this point, because the memos and such were ship it all to, Glickman Marks in New York after the fact, all the masters. And again, it's a very much, and this is what makes it so interesting in comparison directly with Budokan 77. as both a representative of important dates that the band were playing in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is a highly produced and distilled version, whereas to a degree, Japan is a much more organic. I think it's easy to see that they are two completely things coming out of a very similar approach of you want the best shots because you make films. You want to use the best version of Gene spitting fire or Ace shooting a rocket or
Mm-hmm.
Eric Carr playing a drum solo. You're going to take the very best. And there, even if it's shot the same way and you're using the same, what's it called? Cues,
Mm-hmm.
um, to have the cameras on the right person at the right time, you're still going to have microseconds of difference and just
Mm-hmm.
all the other things that are going on around them that make one night better than the other. I always hear more kind of rap saying last night, so which leads me to think that the 22nd is there's more of that in
Or just all the
proper.
raps are 20-second. Maybe they just
Yeah,
decide.
maybe they just sounded better that night. Who knows? I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
great to see the constructive, you know, kind of track sheets
I would
for
love
this,
that.
and
I would love that. It would be so
that would
interesting.
be, yeah, that'd be exciting.
It'd be interesting to look at that because how did they choose what they were going to do or whatever. So and it would also be really interesting to hear what they sounded like um at the time, what like without the overdubs. Because I mean, we're lucky we have the Animalized Live and Uncensored VHS and Laserdisc that were officially released, but there's also an FM broadcast, so you can kind of hear what it sounded like before, you know, they went back in and overdubbed a lot of stuff. I'm assuming a lot of it was just vocal stuff. You need to understand too that when the band was playing together in Tokyo 1977, they were more of a meat and potatoes kind of band. By the time you get to 1980 and you're playing songs like I Was Made for Loving You, New York Groove, Talk to Me, Is That You, there's dozens more vocal harmonies than there were initially. Not to say that they were just all gang vocals back then, but there was clearly an uptick in the musical ability in some of these songs by 1980 that were harder to reproduce in that moment at that time. So you can probably understand why there were overdubs for I Was Made for Loving You. And you a lot of I mean, this is just a musician thing, but there's that chugging part during I Was Made for Loving You. Chugga 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 chugga. That's not an easy part to play every single night. And you'll notice, maybe not so much on this show, but you'll notice in Largo 79, the guitar that Paul uses for it's got a capo on it, but it's raised up a little bit. Like it's not as low as the other guitars because it was hard to keep doing that for 3.5 minutes. So I'm assuming that because the songs became more challenging to play, sometimes that you needed to maybe do overdubs.
Well,
And
there's also another big factor: the production
yeah,
is
the
bigger.
production is much
And
bigger.
the choreography and Ace having to go up on platforms, and yeah, he did that in 76 and 77, but
Mhm,
there's much more real estate on a stadium stage in
mhm,
Australia than there
mhm,
was in Budokan. You
mhm,
know, the stage size is just massive.
mhm,
So you've got all those elements, and then you've got the light show because
mhm.
you've got an outdoor show versus indoor with limitations. Um, so a couple of other things that come into play there.
Yeah, and what people don't also realize too is that Budokan is basically just a gymnasium. That's basically what it is. It's definitely important in Japanese culture, but it's just amazing. This is a legitimate stadium that not only are you dealing with the echo of a full stadium, but you're also dealing with the weather and all kinds of stuff. So um, you could definitely understand why there were more overdubs on this show versus the Japanese 77 show. So, but it's interesting to see the production at this level. Um, Reading in the Mask Hysteria book, or basically any book, and that includes like Kiss on Tour, you'll notice that the European tour wasn't this giant tour. It just wasn't. The European stages and the European crowds were very similar to what Kiss played in the United States at the Palladium in 1980. This, when they finally got to Australia and New Zealand, you were able to get the full Real McCoy show, the big production. It wasn't like that throughout the entire European tour. It really, really wasn't. So
Well, look at the
it's
pro shop videos that circulate from the European tour, particularly uh, the German Junta, or whatever it's
Oh, what's
called.
that called? It was oh
Yeah,
man,
God.
it's gonna bother me now because I can't. But I know what you're talking about. It was um it was with the girl where the girl was going to the
Yeah,
show. I
which
mean,
was supposed to be was supposed to be a Dutch movie originally, but
that's right. It's supposed to be behind the
you
mask.
still,
That's right.
yeah, you're supposed to, you see the stages there are exactly like you said. They're not that much bigger than they had been in 1976. They were slightly larger venues in some cases, but compared to what Australia was, they're absolutely minuscule.
I'm looking through right now because now that we said it, I have to figure out what it was because if I don't, it's gonna bother me so much.
Oh God.
I'm going through. It's got wait a minute. It's got a so there's countdown. There is
Schuler
Schuler
Express,
Express. Schuler Express.
Utah, Kiss, and The Big Show.
Schuler Express. That's what it is. Yeah,
I'm
so
not saying it in German.
you have this giant so it's clear why they chose this to record because the production here was just unmatched as far as all the other dates on the tour. And Hysteria really was huge here. I guess to really understand the magnitude of this show, you can't just watch this show. You have to go. You gotta search for the other things that are available from this time period. Kiss um, in Sydney, where at Town Hall or Town Square, whatever it is, with Norman Gunston that was there to see the crowd of people that were there, was just massive, and that carried on to the show. Shandy was a huge hit. So by the time you get here, they had stopped playing "You're All That I Want, You're All That I Need," and it was replaced by Shandy because Shandy was such a big hit in Australia. Even though there was a music video for it, it wasn't a hit anywhere else. So it was a really big hit in Australia, and that kind of became Australia's song. But to understand the magnitude of this, you gotta search up those other clips because it's it's pretty fascinating to see how big the band was at the time.
Yeah, I mean, in the run up to the tour, they're doing a lot of TV work for Australia.
Hmm.
Australia was getting an overdose of Kiss while Hysteria was in full bloom.
Hmm.
So Hysteria basically runs from "I Was Made for Loving You" through "Shandy,"
Uh-huh.
and then it dies. Then
Yep.
it's done. It dies during the tour there in November. There are trinket vendors who are complaining that they can't sell stuff in the newspapers, that Hysteria has evaporated nearly as quickly as it had started. But for a brief, glorious, few months, it really was the Mayflower moment for many a Kiss fan,
Yes.
who are still fans to this day. This is that moment for them, much more so than in many other countries, to have had a moment so big, so
Hmm.
massive, so PR driven, and they were manipulated without a doubt, but it
Hmm.
was perfect promotion.
Hmm. Another clip I want to mention before we start talking about the show proper, because I think it works up to the show really well. Kiss did they did it on several times they appeared in this, but the one I want to talk about is the World Trade Center clip when they Kiss appeared on Countdown in Australia, 1980. It was one of the first clips with Eric Carr actually on a TV show. Obviously, his first appearance was "Kids Are People" too, but this was another one of the first ones, and it was like one of the first times where you actually got to hear them all speak, and you got to hear Eric, and you got to see them walking around. And the great thing about this clip is it was recently re-aired on Australian television last year. The World Trade Center part was taken out for obvious reasons, but you could still see most of the clip that aired, and it's interesting to hear the band talk about how excited they were to go to Australia, and it was clear that Australia was excited to have them. This clip that they did for the World Trade Center on Countdown. I believe they appeared on Countdown. What date do I have here? They appeared on Countdown September 14th, 1980. So it was just a mere 2 months before the tour actually began. And Eric had only been in the band 2 months at the time. So it's interesting to see the infancy of not only Eric, but also Eric being in that band.
Well, it was filmed August the 4th.
Hmm. Oh, I'm sure I was saying the air date. The air date was 9/14.
Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't just new then for him. It's how new he was. He was newly minted Fox
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mhm. So let's talk about this show, just like we always do. Let's go down and share what we've seen in these song by songs. I mean, this was at the time this was Kiss's longest set list. It's funny to think about that because prior to this they were playing anywhere from 15 to 16 songs, and here we have a 17 song set list. The longest Kiss show at the time clocked in at just under 100 minutes.
Gymnasium.
Gymnasium. Yeah, clocking on 100 minutes. So let's go through. Let's go through this show because I think some of the set list choices are very interesting. It's no surprise that they went back to opening up with Detroit Rock City because I thought the King of the Nighttime World opener in 1979, while cool, it definitely lacked the pomp and circumstance of Detroit Rock City as the opener.
I think it just harkened back to a better time in some ways, opening the set with that song. It's a completely dynamic intro. It is just perfect for kind of how they wanted to present themselves still. And if I recall correctly from Inner Sanctum, they're still using the silhouette colors, but instead of a spotlight in green, you now have the spotlight in brownish yellow for
Rustish,
Eric on
brownish yellow.
stage.
Yep, that's true. Yep. Yep. The Inner Sanctum doesn't really show it, but if you watch the actual full show, you see them coming up from the actual fake camps. It's the same introduction as it was on the Dynasty tour, even down to the same sounds of the things going up and this and that. So, um, but what's cool about this one is on the Dynasty tour, Ace took center stage to start King of the Nighttime World. Now Paul, Gene, and Ace they take the center stage and they start Detroit Rock City together. So which I thought was kind of cool. It's a very very powerful introduction. It's a very powerful introduction.
Yeah, I mean, my notes on it are, looking just at the video, is it's all the cameras really give this the opportunity to be one of the best opening sequences that you've seen.
Mhm.
Um, I don't, I can't think of too many other shows that have been shot with that many cameras and that much
Mm,
intent.
probably the Kiss Symphony and the Rock the Nation. Those are probably the only other two that were shot with that many cameras. I think.
Yeah, but imagine Rock the Nation being edited with 16 cameras. That'd be a seizure.
It was a
You know,
seizure with what it was.
it
So
was a seizure, and it wasn't using that many shots. They had wide angle, they had fars, they had all over the place, close. Um, so my point is that number of cameras in classic Kiss versus what you see in Budokan or Largo with the
mhm,
house cameras, which
mhm,
are very limited in terms of scope and purpose. It's a stunning difference that really is visually impressive. And
mhm.
married with Detroit Rock City, it's really a perfect opener.
Yeah, yeah. And making its first appearance since 1977 is Cold Gin, which has previously been dropped on the Love Gun and then the Dynasty tour. It finally comes back, and this one, you know, at this point, this one overstays its welcome. It was cool to hear it here, but this was one of those songs that just never went away. Not one of my favorites, I'm sorry to say. But I do like the abridged version here, how it goes right into Strutter. And also, too, it's very, very cool in this version of the song that we're hearing all three of the guys sing a gang vocal in this. So it's cool. It's very, very cool to hear that. But again, cool to see it come back. I wish it hadn't overstayed its welcome. My
All
opinion.
right, two different people, two completely different opinions on the same song. I was actually thrilled with Cold Gin here because I can hear a lot more of Ace's vocal on it.
Hmm.
And that's not something that you really get until he's left the band and starts singing the song for himself, or pardon me, for Union. You get to hear more of him singing the song, and prior to that. But you know, it's really cool here to hear that amount of it. But I hate the segue into Strutter.
I love it. That part I love. I'm like, okay, this is cool because then you get to a point like here's the thing: Kiss is a 3-4 minute song band. I feel like Cold Gin kind of meanders on a little too long, and again, this is, in my opinion, Cold Gin overstayed its welcome because by the time they started doing it on the reunion and Psycho Circus tour, and then they did it on the end of the road tour, I was like, okay, I could do without this song. I really could. Cold Gin and 100,000 Years. I always could do without live.
Did Kiss do to Eric Carr what Metallica did to Jason Newsted? I think the drums sound horrendous.
Okay, I'm gonna give a hot take here, and I might get a lot of hate for this because I know the Kiss Army loves Eric Carr. I just don't think Eric was that good. He's so much better than Peter, but I never listened to Eric Carr's drums and went, "Oh my god, fantastic." I never have. I mean, listen to how they were on the Hot in the Shade tour. It's even worse than this. Some of those drums, they just sound like tin cans that he's hitting. And he's got a snare drum. It's not a piccolo snare drum, but it sounds like a piccolo snare drum. It's tuned up way high. I just never loved that guy's drums, the way that they sounded. Especially now because I got so spoiled listening to Eric Singer, who his drums sounded great in the Paul Stanley solo tour, sounded great with Alice Cooper, and then they sounded great with Kiss. So when I go back and listen to this, I'm just not impressed with how the drums sound. I'm just not.
But whose fault would that have been in 1980?
The drummer,
Would Eric, would he
100%.
have been responsible for that, or was he
100%.
just getting behind there and going on adrenaline?
That's possible. I don't think that that's the case, especially when you get down to 1990, 10 years later, and they sounded just as shitty. I think it's the drummer's responsibility to make sure those drums sound good. So, and maybe because I'm looking at it not in current, I didn't live through Eric Carr. By the time I was a fan, Eric Carr is long gone. I just was never impressed by the sound of those drums. I wasn't.
It's weird. I need to go back and listen to. Obviously, I've got a lot of his pre-Kiss stuff and kind of compare his drum sound with Flasher and Mother Nature for the Time in particular, to see if it is him. I mean, I'm not a drummer or a musician, so I can't really analyze it on that level, other than listening to it and seeing how I feel listening to it. But again, I agree with you to a certain extent. On the sound of his drums, particularly at Hot in the Shade.
Oof.
But I don't think the band sounds good on any of the recordings that have surfaced, and being able to compare, say, a soundboard, Auckland. I just
Well, let's
find
get
that
apart. There are no Hot in the Shade soundboards besides Detroit. And the one on Kissology has that extra audience in there, and then the first night of Detroit 1990 also circulates, but just it sounds really shitty. So, but yeah, you're right. There are no sound. But even when listen to the audience recordings of Hot in the Shade, poo poo.
Yep. Right.
So so we go Cold Gin into Strutter. Again, both of these songs, Cold Gin and Strutter, first album tracks, they were dropped following the Rock and Roll Over tour. Early dates of the Rock and Roll Over tour had Strutter in there, but it was dropped soon after. And then not playing the Love tour, not playing the Dynasty tour. So you have the band kind of going back to basics here, is the way that I thought about it with these two songs.
Yeah. Which is interesting considering the amount of new songs that they really are dialing into the set at this point, that you get a few real outliers. I mean, Strutter, that's quite an interesting thing to be throwing in there when you've got, so many new songs, but I think that's why it's there. You need something to counterbalance, something roots oriented to balance the scales with all that new crap.
Yeah. And then here we go. We have some new crap coming up right next. Here's Shandy. I like this song. I know why it was put in the set list. I know why it was a large part of the Inner Sanctum. It's a big hit down under, so it just made sense for them to do it here.
Okay, bear with me a minute because I've got 3 points to make about Shandy.
All right, I'm listening.
Other than I've always hated the song. Terrible place in the sequence. This song is a pace killer at this point in the set. Then again, after the breakneck speed of the opening trio, it's more of a spike strip. The guitar sound is grating, but Paul's vocal is brilliant. Whether I like the song or not is beyond the point. It's a hit, so it had to be there in Australia. So I get it. It wasn't for me. Gene looking menacing while playing Shandy is the most ridiculous thing possible. Talk about forgetting how to play a role or not play a role, or being so dedicated to the role that you're going to be the demon while the balladeer is singing his love song. It is just insane. But Ace looks like he's having fun, as does Eric. Um, I like the ending of the song live,
Hmm. I
mainly
like
because
how
it
it
means
goes.
it's the end of the song.
Well, yeah. I like how it goes right into Doctor Love. I think that's was really cool.
Yeah, that's a good segue.
So I thought that was an excellent segue to do there, and again, um, a good performance. And then to go right into Doctor Love, I love Doctor Love in 1980. I really do.
We're listening to the same show because
We are.
I think this performance is utterly lacking its character, the tempo. The mix is horrible, but there's a great Ace solo.
Hmm.
And from the video, they do a great job of filming this song or
Hmm.
editing this song for the video.
Hmm. Yeah. So love Doctor Love, and then we go back into Firehouse. I don't have any notes on Firehouse other
Um,
than it was just fast.
but did someone call me out on one of the other shows where I said Sam instead of the tree? So this
That's right.
time it is Sam.
Yeah,
So
Sam here. Sam's back here.
Sam is here. So thank you for pointing that out, and do point out any inconsistencies or when we misspeak, because that's what it is about. Um, Ace's goofy grinning during this song is great. There's great wide angle shots. But again, what is it with people filming Kiss concerts that they could never seem to frame Gene's flame right?
I don't know, because you think it would be something easy. Because I think everybody they want to replicate what they did in Cobalt Hall 76, where you start tight, then as he blows the flame, you're gonna do a quick pull out. People they want to do that, but I never really understood why it was so hard to film the flame, because it seems pretty straightforward. He's gonna stand right here, and he's gonna spit that way, just shoot that way.
Or he's outdoors, so it could be that way,
Well, I
and
mean,
it's windy.
you're gonna know which way he's going because he's gonna test it out which way he's going.
Yeah, theoretically, anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so coming up next, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 new songs in a row between the last couple of records. 5 new songs, unheard of in history. 5 new songs in a row that were from the last 2 studio records. 5 new songs in a row. 3 of them are Ace Frehley songs, unheard of in history.
Yeah, and the next two are singles in Australia.
Both of these singles were performed on Countdown leading up to the show. Basically, I actually think that was shot in Perth because that was the only other place. Correct me if I'm wrong. The only other place they had the full production, like they had in Sydney. So, and this is all available online. You can go and search us. They mimed, lip synced the studio versions, and they just did like a live video for it. It's interesting to note on that, just to get off on a little bit of tangent here, that those are considered music videos now. And I say that because the other Australian show called Rage, when they aired all the Kiss videos, they included "Talk to Me" and "Is
Mhm.
That You" in as a music video. I never considered those music videos.
Well, they are legitimate music videos
I
because
can,
they were filmed for purpose,
yeah, but
which was to be that.
I always consider them an appearance on a TV show. I never considered them a music video. I considered "Rock and Roll Night," "Come On and Love Me" music videos. I didn't consider "Hard Luck Woman" a music video. That was an appearance on Don Kirshner's rock concert. "I Was Made for Loving You" music video. "She's So
But they were
European."
even Don Kirshner was used elsewhere,
Well,
sent
yeah,
out on video reels, for promotional purposes. So to me, it had a purpose originally, and then it transcends that purpose and becomes a music video, regardless of however you want to,
yeah.
call it.
I never categorized it as a music video. It was a promotional clip used for whatever, but like a legitimate music video, something that I could watch on Friday night videos or Headbangers Ball. Domino, Unholy, Shandy, Lick It Up. Those are music videos. I just didn't consider that a music video. I thought it was interesting that they included it in Rage. So anyway, that's enough of my tangent. But we got these 2 new songs. "Talk to Me," "Is That You." Love them. Absolutely love the performance. Absolutely love Eric's drum parts. I really love both of these songs from Unmasked. "Talk to Me" and "Is That You."
Talk to Me, I like Ace playing the Mini Explorer,
Mhm.
but performance wise, Gene's bass and the backing vocal harmonies on Talk to Me are absolutely horrendous. So they clearly didn't do enough cleanup work in the studio to make me happy. Is That You? It's weird. I loved this song. The first time I played the Unmasked album and this song came on, I loved this song. I For years and years and years, and I didn't know that it wasn't written by Kiss, even though it clearly said it wasn't written by Kiss. I didn't know that it was brought in. I didn't understand that concept. And then I hear it live, and boy, is that a difference in experience. It's just a song that to me does not work out live at all and never did during that tour.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a shame that this was the only. It was a shame this was the only live recording of "Is That You?" And well, "Talk to Me" we got later on the Japanese and Australian farewell tour. I love these songs. There's just something fresh about them that I've always really enjoyed.
Well, my opinion might change if we were to hear an off the soundboard of Sydney 1980 that was warmer and less trebly or shrill
Mhm.
than the versions of the audio that we've heard today. And again, going back to some of the stuff we've heard in recent years on Twitter, that audio is much more pleasing for my
Mhm.
taste. Now, opinions vary. Again, I would like to hear something warmer, something
Mhm.
softer, something less shrill, less trebly, less EQ'd. You know,
Mm.
um, through that high end, a little more bottom end or low end.
So up next we have 2000 Man. Ace's excuse me, Ace's second lead vocal of the night, and then his guitar solo follows this. I really enjoyed the song. What's interesting to note is at this current time in the band, 2000 Man was performed more times than Shock Me. We consider Shock Me Ace's signature song, but that was only performed on the Love Gun and Alive 2 tour. This is the second legitimate tour that 2000 Man and Ace's solo follows it. This was performed more than Shock Me. Were they considering this classic Kiss more so than Shock Me? Or were they just trying to push the previous album? Because as they said in Australia, Dynasty was still a pretty big seller at this point. So it's possible that the two songs off of Dynasty and the Dynasty tour they survived into 1980, which are the next two songs. But I like the version of this song. It is a little quick, but I just think that's Eric. Eric was very excited and very happy so to play. We're getting to a point now where I'm skipping over Ace's guitar solos because it's too long, and especially when there's no visual aspect attached to it. When I'm listening to this song like on my phone or something, I always skip over the guitar solo. So I have nothing to say about the guitar solo because I skipped over it. I'm sorry.
Just as well as you say that, because I also note that the tempo is a bit problematic on this, but
Mhm.
the solo is where it's at on this for me.
Mhm.
Um, Visually and in terms of performance,
Mhm.
Ace nails it. I
Mhm.
just love it. I think actually this may have been one of the few shows. I think Eric maybe, and again, go check in Mask Hysteria, that he threw up before this show because of the size of the audience.
He did.
It
Oh,
was
look at
one of,
that. Oh.
it was one of the Australian shows, I believe, and I'll have to
Mm.
fact check myself, but someone else can probably get
Mm.
there before I do. That the audience was so big and there was so much pressure on him. It was the kind of
And
the other
being
side where he
recorded
threw up.
and being basically set up for a TV special, I assume the nerves probably got to him. Um,
Yeah, so I love 2000 Man on
Me
this
too.
because of the visual elements.
I don't love the
They
solo, but I love
nail it. Well, they nail the elements in the solo, the close-ups of the flying guitar, the rocket shooting. They they absolutely do a great job on that, and the audience piped into the mix is just the perfect counterbalance for atmosphere. It really, all the elements come together really well here for an Ace Frehley experience.
I agree. Up next, I Was Made for Loving You. What's up with the top hat, man? I don't get the top hat. I could do without the top hat. And
Bit of a
the tempo, it feels like they were rushing to get to the end of the song. And I like I Was Made for Loving You. It certainly sounded better on the Unmasked tour versus the Dynasty tour, but the tempo on this one, it's the first time I noticed like, man, slow down.
You stole my notes because I said terrible intro rap. Holy shit, the tempo. Well, at least it was over quickly.
And the hat. Get rid of that hat, man.
The hat doesn't bother me. I like Slade, so I got no problem with the top
I
hat.
don't
So I don't
dislike
think that
Slade, but
doesn't work.
but that's the same thing. Like, okay, I like hot dogs and I like pizza. I don't want a hot dog wrapped in pizza. I don't want that.
Why not? Certainly
Separately. I
not.
want them separately. You know,
Well,
I
you
uh
know,
I
David
like ice.
Johansen wore a top hat. You know, the Dolls.
I like the dolls, and I like Slade.
Slash wears a top hat. You don't like
I like
Slash?
Slash. I like Slash, but here's the thing: I don't want Slash playing guitar for Kiss. I want to hear Slash in Velvet Revolver and Guns N' Roses. I don't want to hear him playing for Kiss. I don't want to hear that. It wouldn't
Fair
fit.
enough.
It wouldn't fit. Um, Now we got the third and final Ace Frehley vocal. We have New York Groove. We did talk a little bit about this because this was officially released on the You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best import CD from Japan, and then in addition to that, it was on the vinyl of all countries. But a note that I want to mention, and I was waiting to mention this, but New York Groove and Calling Dr. Love were released as an Acoin video single for promotion. Do you remember seeing this?
No.
So there was, and this has been available in fan circles forever. Acoin actually released whatever the purposes were. We don't know. Maybe it was to just hype up Inner Sanctum or hype up something. But there was a version that was printed on 16 and 35 millimeter film of New York Groove and Calling Dr. Love. And it's
That's
been in
very cool.
fan circles forever. So who knows what the purpose of that was for? But it was, I guess, a video single from this. Whatever they were trying to use it for, who knows? And who knows why they chose those two songs? It's ridiculous to choose a solo album song and an old song. I'm not sure why they chose those, but it is the way it is out there.
Well, New York is a really good performance of the song
Mhm.
Hair, which to me makes it no surprise why it was released, as bonus material at some point.
Mhm.
That it happened to in 1996, Blockbuster Greeting as well. Very good performance.
Mhm. Man, you know what? I have that CD somewhere. Can't find it. No clue where it is. My friend Kevin Gladden gave it to me at the Creatures Fest in 2022. I have no clue where it is. Not if my life depended on it, I would never find this thing.
That was
Clue.
such a cool bonus CD. One of
Yeah,
one of the very, very nice things.
yeah, yeah. It was very very cool. Okay, so now we got Love Gun. I could do without the intro of these songs. Just get to the song. Um, I don't really have any notes on Love Gun. The tempo is better in Love Gun than it was for I Was Made for Loving You. Um, but yeah, no real notes on this song.
Yeah, I just note the tempo again, but it becomes a fixture for the 1980s. It's not as bad as say 1984.
Oh my god!
Um,
And then the
but
intro in
again,
19 in when it gets there. Oof.
the
So
the vocal sound on this, though, again, I have a real problem with the tinny and metallic sound,
mm,
the shrillness. I don't want shrill.
hmm, yeah. So the unfortunate part here is if you're watching along with us using the version of Kissology, you are going to miss the blood solo and the first part of God of Thunder, and you're going to pick up at the drum solo. So because most of the versions that we're going to talk about miss that, I'm going to skip that part. I think the drum solo here is a good representation of Eric's skills at this point in time. It also shows that this guy was way more skilled than Peter Criss, especially 1979 Peter Criss. So when you can, it's clear that's why they chose him to be his replacement, his successor. And what's cool to hear is you hear the crowd going, Eric, 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 Eric. If there was ever an Eric Carr documentary, that should be how it starts. Eric, Eric, from this
Great,
show.
great
So
sequence.
so that's a good sequence. I really appreciate that they actually included the drum solo here because um this they could have easily just cut it completely. So I was glad that they kept it here. So this was very cool to see. I really really enjoyed watching Eric play, and you could tell he is nervous. The drum solo is very very long, but I thought he played well, and I really do like the performance of God of Thunder quite a bit.
It's a very cool performance, and I'm not sure which video version I wrote this note down from, but there's one point during it that I find really endearing. It's when one of the camera crews is walking around in the pit, and walk by another one. I just love those sorts of things where you actually see those sorts of elements coming out, just because it makes it a little bit more real.
Mm.
So that's all. I've got nothing to add to the nice things that you said about Eric Carr. That's it at all.
See, I do like him sometimes.
Yeah.
No, I really do. I like Eric. There's just, as a musician, I have those quips about his sounds of his drums. And holy hell, we're back on cocaine again as far as the speed of Rock and Roll All Night goes. My word, this is so fast. I don't ever enjoy this song, but I super don't enjoy this song being this fast.
I enjoy this song a lot, but not because of the tempo, but because of the audience interaction and the
Okay.
Gene camera. And this is one where I say the vocals sound good here, but it's visually fun. Visually fun. If only there
Mhm.
was a band that was visually fun. Well, this to me encapsulates Kiss wonderfully, and I just got off on it completely.
I appreciated the inclusion of the call and answer session for from 100,000 years included in here. So I thought that was kind of cool that they were trying something quote unquote new or trying to do other things in here as far as audience participation goes. But it ends just like it always ends with confetti and Paul smashing the guitar. But again, this song is so overplayed that anytime it's going to be in a video, which I think it's going to be in every single video that we do, unless we do Foundations Forum 1993. This is one of those songs where I'm just like, I've heard it. Unless I'm there and catching confetti in my tour book, I don't really love this song.
Yeah, um, I'm not going to argue that point.
Mhm, mhm. I think these next two songs are very oddly placed as far as encore songs. Um, Shout Out Loud, I never really viewed it as an encore song, even though it was the encore on the Rock and Roll Over tour. It seems like it should be part of the proper set. And King of the Nighttime World, it went from first to second to last. You kind of wonder why they chose that song to put that song there. I guess because they knew they weren't going to do Beth, but I thought there could have been other songs that may or may not have fit in that other encore spot instead of King of the Nighttime World. But no real notes about either one of those songs. My other biggest call out here is the how they bowed and the audience is just going completely nuts, and you could tell the band is going nuts too, bowing in front of that big of a crowd.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of notes on either of these songs, but I absolutely agree that the sequencing of both of them doesn't fit at the end of the show, especially King of the Nighttime World in particular. I think Shout It Out Loud could easily have just been bumped up a position to go before Rock and Roll All Night, and King of the Nighttime World would probably have been better served being replaced with something else, anything except You're All That I Want. Um,
The
Shout It
demo.
Out Loud, I had two words for it. I had just have absolutely fantastic though. It may be in the wrong place, but it sounds really damn good for the song,
Yeah,
which I've been known to kind of hate on at times because I either love it or hate it. Today I
I
like it.
love it. I've
Um,
always loved
King,
Shout Out Loud.
King of the Nighttime World. I have nothing to say about it musically. Positionally, awkward, but great camera on Ace at the beginning of the song.
Mhm,
Absolutely fantastic. So
mhm.
again, watch the video and kind of cue in on some of the moments that you enjoy or catch your eye. And again, it's all what caught my eye on the day that I was really focusing on.
Black Diamond closes out the show. It's interesting to note that on the Dynasty tour, Rock and Roll All Night closed out the show, and Black Diamond was the encore break. I prefer this song as the very very last song because there's no risers here, but the drums do go up, and there's a different graphic underneath Eric's drums versus what Peter was. But I think as far as visually trying to get to that same Alive 2 image where the drums are up and the band is up and there's all fire, I think that's a more powerful ending image than Paul smashing the guitar in Rock and Roll Night. I know later on the drums and they would go up there in Rock and Roll Night too, but I'm talking about in the early infancy of the band. I think Black Diamond as a closure is more powerful than Rock and Roll Night. So it's very very cool that they close out the set with this, and it's cool that they let Eric sing this song, and I think he actually does a really great job singing this. Um, Later on in the 80s, I feel like Eric Carr's vocals, they went much more Cookie Monster. They're not very Cookie Monster here. He's got a nice growl here, and he sounds excited. He sounds excited. So I was glad that they were able to see this, and it was presented in such a version that you're able to enjoy it. Um, I was talking earlier about the two different versions of the show where you had the time coded version and the non time coded version. Prior to Kissology, my non time coded version never had Black Diamond.
Hmm. I
Oddly
don't
enough.
remember.
Who knows?
Not a clue. I think Black Diamond is a very strong finish to
Mhm.
the show, visually and performance wise. I agree with your comments about Eric and his vocals. They really do well here.
Mhm.
But he hadn't sung Young and Wasted yet, so no wonder his voice became a cookie monster, singing more of Gene's songs. And yeah, that'll do it. It's a great finale. I mean, I kind of find it funny thinking that they're going through the motions of the show, kind of on autopilot, bringing it to the end, the climax, crescendo, knowing that in 5 seconds after it fades to black, they're going to be running like mad to jump into cars to get out of there before the crowd does. Just knowing of what's coming next in terms of the sequence of the show is kind of funny when you're watching it. You know, almost countdown in there at 5, 4, 3, 2, run.
Mhm. 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 And then you do see a little bit of that running because there is, those little clips in the Inner Sanctum them running, and they're probably staged for the camera. But it's still cool to kind of see that stuff when you're watching the Inner Sanctum, knowing that they're leaving Sydney at this point in time. And then,
It's an authentic recreation. It's not staged.
hey, who knows? Maybe it could have been authentic. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's how it happened. I don't know. But it was cool to see it at that time. But what are your final thoughts on this show?
I was really happy that it was included on Kissology, even with the imperfections of it. Again, there are so many versions of the show that you can check out. There are lots of little differences in terms of sounds, in terms of visuals. There are so many versions of the Inner Sanctum itself, which are really interesting to see and kind of see how it's coming together. And again, going over to YouTube and checking out the video clips that are kind of B-roll or new versions or new imaginings, new creations of that classic stuff is really cool. But it's an important tour to have documented properly.
I agree.
It's
I agree.
it's the rebirth of the band, the ingestion of a new member of the group, a new character, a new identity, and for a fleeting moment, they actually looked like they stood a chance
Mhm.
of going forward. I mean, it's only after the fact that we know some of the kind of darker side of what happens after Australia when they get back to the States,
Mhm.
well, after New Zealand, obviously. Yeah, and the clock is ticking. In a nutshell, you know, Mask Hysteria, the book, was born because I needed to tell the story of why the Elder happened. And
Mhm.
that's, say no more, say no more. The clock was ticking on a record contract and the date of delivery of a new album. So this really is the last hurrah for Eric becoming a member of the group. And after that, they were expected to have an album out by June
Mhm.
81.
Mhm. And then we know what happened there. And if you want to know what happened there, there is another great book called The Odyssey, which is on music from the Elder. Is that still available?
Yep. No, Tim and I put that out, 8 years ago now. It is still available on Amazon, physical, and I think that's one of the few that are still up on Kindle. Um,
Yeah, I got the iBook. So I have it on my iPad.
Actually, it's one of only two that are still available on iBook.
Hmm.
Both of the works that were primarily Tim's creations are still available on iBook.
Hmm.
So
So, in closing, I thank everybody for watching and commenting and coming back to the Inner Sanctum to view this show. What I hope people take away from this show is I hope maybe they watch the show before they watch this episode, or um, they're what's the word I'm looking for? They want to watch the show after watching this. So that's the whole point of this. So dig out your old VHS, dig out your Kissology Volume 2 or your DVDs, your files, and hopefully you could watch the show along with us. That's the point of this.
yeah, if we can inspire you to go revisit something that you haven't watched or listened to in a while, if only to criticize us for our opinions, then it's a win because you've gone back and re-enjoyed something or reappraised it. We're not we're not telling anyone how to listen to or consume or what to think about it. It's just that we're re-enjoying a lot of this stuff that was important and central to us as Kiss fans long ago in days of yore where there was dial-up and real audio.
Kissfaq.com. So until next time, this is the Inner Sanctum, and thanks for joining us.